go. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for the rest of the viewers to join me. Can you hear me okay? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Rich Wayne. I'll be your host this evening. Actually, I'm your host every time for Do What Works Fast webinars. And this is number 7. This is our session on cognitive therapy. And this is kind of where I got my start. I've been fascinated by it. It's been really helpful in my career as a therapist, working both in a hospital and in private practice. And I've been able to help a lot of people through this process of cognitive therapy. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that is today. And, oh, you know what? I wanted to go ahead and record this. Give me just a sec. I'm making an audio recording as well for those people who would prefer that. So I'm just going to reintroduce that again. Once again, my name is Rich Wayne. I'm a marriage and family therapist licensed in the state of California. And tonight's session of the Do What Works Fast webinars is on cognitive therapy. And this is an area that I started with when I first became a therapist. And I found it to be highly effective in helping people to improve how they feel by being able to detect and challenge the thoughts that they were having. Today we're going to share a couple of tools that will help you to go ahead and do that. And what my clients do often is they use the tools for a while and then they just sort of automatically do it. And they no longer have to fill out worksheets and things like that. They become very, very good at challenging the thoughts that cause them, that might be distorted, that cause them to potentially feel bad. So cognitive therapy has been around often on, just in the last half of the 1900, or 1950 on. Aaron Beck, is credited with founding cognitive therapy, but there's also a couple of other key players, Albert Ellis and David Burns, MD. Aaron Beck really honed the cognitive aspect of things. Albert Ellis focused very much on one aspect of cognitive therapy, which is primarily dealing with the shoulds, musts, ought tos, and have tos. They believed, he created a version of cognitive therapy called rational emotive behavioral therapy. And Beck believed that all these artificial rules that we create for ourselves, should, must, ought, need, ought to, all those types of rules were what made us, miserable overall in life. And so his focus was entirely on catching people in the middle of those rules, looking for, the shoulds that they're doing, the need tos, the ought tos, the have tos, etc. And he would say to somebody that you're, shoulding all over yourself, or stop shoulding all over the place. Or, you're being masturbatory. Stop masturbating, just being focused on this must happen this way. Because clearly, if it's not happening that way, it mustn't happen that way. So once again, we're starting to suffer in that case. And the idea is to limit our suffering, change the thoughts, The premise of cognitive therapy is as you think, so you feel. Shakespeare said, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Buddha said, all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. There was an ancient Greek Stoic philosopher named Epictetus who is widely kind of credited with, thinking that became the basis for cognitive therapy. And Epictetus said, it's not what happens to us, it's how we react that matters. And he also said, it's not what happens to men, it's how they view things that matters. So how you look at it that matters. And basically that's what cognitive therapists believe. And they believe that sometimes our thoughts about things cause us to feel a particular way, and those thoughts may not be accurate. They might be distorted thoughts. And that was very much the focus of Beck's work. And his work has been taken up by his daughter, Judith, and she now runs the Institute of Cognitive Therapy. Albert Ellis, once again, rational emotive behavioral therapy. He's famous for having been kind of a geeky guy in college, and he made a bet with one of his buddies, and they had to try and ask out every woman who sat on a park bench over a month at Central Park. And Ellis had never been very successful with the ladies. His friend was, about the same. And when they did this, he was absolutely petrified of thinking, that these people are going to reject them and something horrible is going to happen and things like that. And as it turns out, in the course of that month's period time, he got dates. He got some people actually said yes. Many people, and many women were actually very nice to him. And he was deathly afraid of beautiful women. And he found that beautiful women were also very nice. So once again, he had this thought about his world was dangerous, and approaching, someone who was very attractive was problematic for him. And it turned out not to be at all. And, that experiment caused him to continue on in psychology and then eventually form rational emotive behavioral therapy. So tonight we're going to take a look at cognitive therapy is very tool focused. And David Burns, who is also a famous figure in cognitive therapy, he wrote the book Feeling Good. He also wrote When Panic Attacks. Feeling Good has sold millions and millions of copies, as a book on cognitive therapy. And it's really just the tools that you use, its forms and things like that. And he explains many things and the effects of challenging your thoughts effectively. Burns, and we're going to use one of his tools tonight. I'm going to teach you about that. Those that are subscribers to Do What Works Fast webinars will actually get copies of those tools as well, where they can go ahead and utilize them, in their lives. And I've had many clients utilize Burns's daily mood log, which is a fabulous tool for challenging your thoughts. And it also identifies the top, basically 14 cognitive distortions that we can have in our thoughts, and then, how to challenge those, what you can do with that. So Burns, his book Feeling Good, has been tested a number of times using the gold standard double-blind, type tests that they use for pharmaceuticals. And Burns's book Feeling Good is 72 to 73% effective in alleviating depression in highly depressed people every single time they test it. 72 to 73%. And there's no drug on the market that is 72% effective in terms of antidepressants, things like that. There's not a single one. There's no combination of drugs that are 72%. They say that after a period of time, about 66% of people get help from an antidepressant, and often that's, might be combined with therapy and other types of things. So often that takes place, that there is some sort of a benefit, but generally speaking, right off the bat, somewhere between 6 and 8% of people are immediately helped by an antidepressant. The rest of us, it takes a while to build up the therapeutic value and everything. You have to, activate your behavior. And a lot of this information was in our session on coming out of depression, which was an earlier Do What Works Fast. And I would encourage you to go ahead and look that up and watch that if you haven't. If you've joined us a little bit later in the series, I encourage you to go ahead and watch that. The replays are available to our members. And that one has all the tools that are effective with depression that is, currently to date that I've been able to find and use and test. And like I said, daily mood logs and thought records are extremely powerful in helping people to change how they feel, alleviate not only depression, but anxiety as well, or other, kind of challenges that we face about our world overall. So Burns Feeling Good, 72 to 73% effective. And what they did was they set up an experiment, and they had people coming to see a doctor about their depression. So it had gotten bad enough that they were seeking help. They're either going to see a doctor or they're going to see a therapist at this clinic. And they told the people, half the people, we're really sorry. Well, they told everybody this. We're really sorry. There's not going to anyone available for about 4 weeks. We'll call you every week and check in with you to make sure that you're okay, but we won't be able to get you in to see anybody for about 4 weeks. Half the people, they also said, but a lot of people have found that this book is very helpful, and they gave them a copy of Feeling Good. Now, we don't know what they did with that copy of Feeling Good. They could have done anything with it. They could have banged themselves in the head with it. They could have used it as a doorstop. We don't know. But 72 to 73% of the people who got the book Feeling Good, by the time their 4 weeks rolled around, they said, I don't think I need to see him anymore. I'm fine. I feel good. I feel better. I feel much better than I did before. 100% of the people who did not receive the book still needed to see the doctor. They hadn't improved. They were still feeling very depressed and pretty bad about their lives themselves. Negative about self, negative about your world, negative about your future is how cognitive therapists define depression. So they thought, well, maybe we picked the people who are going to get well anyway. And so they took that group of people who did not get the book and who were still depressed. And they said, we're really sorry, we were wrong. The demand is much higher than we thought. And so there's actually going to be about another 4 weeks before you get to see a doctor. However, a lot of people have found that this book is helpful, and they give them a copy of the book. Again, we don't know what they did with it. We don't know if they read it or not. Depressed people, sometimes people get so depressed that they can't read. So who knows, what they were able to do. Maybe someone read it to them or something like that. But they, checked in with them on a weekly basis. And by the time the 4 weeks had rolled around, 73% of that second group no longer needed to see the doctor. Now, once again, depression can lift on its own, so they might have had it lifted on their own, but the numbers are kind of, weird that they're so horribly consistent. And every time they test that book, it's 72 to 73% effective with, I might add, no side effects, like you often find with antidepressant medication. I think it's selling for about $7.95 on Amazon.com. You can find a link to it on my website, which is richwayne.com. If you're interested in resolving your depression or being at least 72% sure that you're going to have some sort of a positive effect on yourself, you can go ahead and get Burns' book, Mind Over Mood. About 20 years or so later, he wrote a book called When Panic Attacks, which is focused exclusively on using cognitive approaches to address panic disorder and anxiety, and specific phobias and things like that. And once again, that book is there's a slight tweak to things, but it has more of a focus on anxiety. So if anxiety is your challenge, that is the book for you, When Panic Attacks. That one I think is actually available on audio as well. So it's a book that you could listen to if reading is not your thing. Let's go ahead and go on with this. So we have these people who have identified that our thoughts affect how we feel. In fact, I've had slides that I couldn't get up right now, but those slides had something called the ABCs. of cognitive therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is basically the same thing, but it's got a behavioral component added in there. And actually, behavior is really important if you're trying to address depression or anxiety. And once again, we've talked about that in some of our other sessions. You have to behaviorally activate. And even if you're taking medication, none of our antidepressant medications actually create more serotonin or dopamine or norepinephrine, which are the primary neurotransmitters that they're trying to affect. They simply retard the reuptake of those neurotransmitters. So you have to create your own neurotransmitters inside your body and your mind. And the way you do that is activating. Connecting to people, learning something new, accomplishing something, achieving something, laughing, once again, making social connection. All those types of things can generate positive neurotransmitters and then give your antidepressant medication something to work with. So just something to think about overall. But with what we're going to be talking about today, no medication is necessary. And if you're already taking medication, it's not a problem. It won't interfere with it or anything. And in fact, it might make it work a little bit better too. So let's go ahead and just, I was going to tell you about the ABCs. So the ABCs, cognitive therapy is as simple as ABC. And the ABCs are, the A is the adverse event that takes place. It's not always true. It's not 100% of the time, but most of the time something happens. And then we have B, beliefs about it. So we have beliefs about what's happened. We have thoughts about what's happened to us and what it means about what it means about us, what it means about other people, what it means about our world, what it means about our future. So those are beliefs that we have about those. Those beliefs that we have C, consequences. The consequences are often in terms of mood. They can dampen our mood. They can create what we might consider negative moods: fear, sadness, worry, anxiety, depression, ultimately. Those types of things, our thoughts about something. They can also create behavioral consequences. We act differently when, based on our thoughts. If we think someone hurt us on purpose, we might stay away from them. We might try and get them back. We might do all sorts of things to kind of, that we wouldn't do if we didn't have that thought. So, the idea is our thoughts often lead to our actions and to our behaviors. So to avoid those consequences, what you can do is D, dispute your thought or challenge your thoughts. And that's what we're gonna take a look at today. We're gonna take a look at two really powerful tools that will help you to go ahead and dispute or challenge your thoughts overall. First, to identify them, and then dispute or challenge them overall. And that A, B, C, D, that disputation, leads to E, an easier, more energized life. Better mood, moving toward things rather than away, charging your life rather than hiding from it. That's what you can get from learning how to challenge your thoughts. And some people find that all of their misery is because they have this propensity to think in a certain way. And once you start to, if you want to change any pattern, it's just a pattern. And if you want to change any pattern, all you have to do is become aware of the pattern, and when it's being put into place, you intervene in it. You stop, you catch yourself doing that pattern, and then you do something else. And that's how you change it. And that's all cognitive therapy is it's helping us to identify a situation that happened, what our thoughts were during that time, how that created certain feelings inside of us, and then learning how to dispute or challenge those thoughts. And sometimes it's just, one approach, the thought record is very much like a courtroom. What's the evidence for this particular thought? And we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to it specifically for you. Once again, both of these tools are really powerful. Pick or try them both, and then choose the one that really works for you. And then you work that for a while. And once you do that, after in a relatively short period of time, you'll start to immediately recognize when you're having a thought that's causing you a negative consequence overall, and you'll be able to challenge it. So let's get into the actual devices themselves. By the way, I was mentioning Buddha and Epictetus and things, and Shakespeare. The Bible has a lot about our thoughts. And in Psalms 15:2, it says, "How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and every day have sorrow in my hearts?" That's a great wrestling with our thoughts. That's a fabulous metaphor for what happens to us. Also, in Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Once again, a lot of people believe that our faith and scriptures and things like that can help us to get to that place. As it turns out, there's about 365 fear nots or do not be afraids in the Bible. So the authors of that and God who inspired those folks, knew that we, needed to be told not to be afraid. Fear not, and we needed one of those for every single day, because often that can affect us in a major way. So the first document that the first tool that we're going to go take a look at is David Burns' Daily Mood Log. And Burns, first created this, I think, in 1984, and he revises it every once in a while. But it's basically the same tool, and it's so it's stood the test of time. It's lasted very, very well, and this is his primary tool. Now, Burns, I've actually done some seminars with him. He's a fascinating guy. He's pretty amazing. Burns has modified this tool and used it for a variety of different things, and he's basing a whole approach on this particular tool right now. And that is fascinating too. We're not going to get into that tonight, but once again, this is something that's evolving and becoming better and better. So Burns' product is called the Daily Mood Log. Once again, those that are members of Doing What Works Fast webinars will get copies of Daily Mood Log, and they can print out as many as they like, and they can go ahead and use that. And also, if you're using it and you have questions about it, next week will be our office hour. So I'm going to be on online for an hour, and you can ask any questions you want about anything. It doesn't have to be about cognitive therapy. Anything, from a psychological standpoint. I probably won't be able to tell you what reality is. Well, actually, I could. Perception is reality. How we perceive things is our reality. And once again, that's a key premise of cognitive therapy, that we can begin to change our reality by changing our perception of things, our thoughts, the thoughts that we have about things. So Burns' Daily Mood Log begins with identifying whatever the upsetting event was. And I'm going to actually take you through a couple of these documents that have been filled out by a client of his and or clients of his, so that you can kind of see how someone might fill them out and go ahead and use them. And first of all, the Daily Mood Log looks a little something like this. I don't know if you guys can see that, but up at the top is the upsetting event, and then next is the emotions that you have. And so you go through and you circle the emotions and indicate how intense that emotion is for you at the present time when you're filling out this document. So you're going to go ahead and identify just how intense the emotion is that's bothering you. Before, when you start to fill out the form, and then after you work through all of the negative thoughts and converted them into positive thoughts overall. And then you're going to go ahead and rank it afterwards, how you feel after you've gone ahead and gone through the exercise. And the idea is to take, very, very powerful emotions that you're feeling almost 100% and take them down to more minuscule amounts for the most part. So Burns lists 10 categories of emotions: sad, anxious, guilty, inferior, lonely, embarrassed, hopeless, frustrated, angry, and then other. So you can go ahead and do a write-in emotion. And a lot of his clients do write something in, another key thing that they're feeling that don't fit into any of those other categories. Now, in each one of those major categories, he has 4 or 5 different levels of that emotions. Under sad, for example, he has blue, depressed, down, unhappy. Under anxious, he has worried, panicky, nervous, frightened. Under guilty, he has remorseful, bad, ashamed, etc. You guys get the idea. So all you do is, so really simply go through and circle the emotion that you're feeling, the degree of it you're kind of feeling, and then what percentage. I'm feeling depressed 100%, or 100% down, or 90%, or 80% ashamed. I feel 100% defective and worthless. So once again, that's all you do. You go through and circle. And so this is what's called, from my previous life, we had unaided awareness and aided awareness. Unaided awareness would be, how do you feel? And then people say, oh, I'm really sad, or I'm really depressed, or I'm anxious, or I'm fearful. I just feel really down. In this case, we're doing aided awareness. He's giving you a bunch of emotions. And there, by having aided awareness, you can actually get to more of the feelings that are there. And what do we want to kind of uncover all the things that might be contributing to, what happened because of the upsetting event, whatever that happened to be. So after you fill out your emotions, you start listing your negative thoughts. And the way to get to your negative thoughts is to ask yourself, what was I thinking right before I started feeling this way, or while I felt this way? So what was I thinking then? And then you just go ahead and write those negative thoughts down. And after you write down each of the negative thoughts that you were having, and he's got room for 8 of them on this particular document. And once again, you can have more. You don't have to fill in all 8 slots. It might be just 1 or 2 really big negative thoughts that are bothering you. After you do that, you write down what percentage do you believe that thought? Do you believe it 100%? Do you believe it 80%? And often when we're in a state where we're filling out one of these things, where we're starting to feel bad, we have a change in emotion that's moving us in a negative direction. When that happens, we're often feeling those at a very high level, 90%, 100%, etc. Now we're going to take a look for the cognitive distortions in the thoughts. And as I said, Burns identifies 10 categories of distortions, about 14 cognitive distortions at all. And those are all at the bottom of the daily mood log. So you don't have to remember them. You don't have to learn them. You don't have to study this too heavily. But once you've done this for a while, once again, you'll remember the distortions. And the idea is these are the things that create a distorted thought. His first one, for example, is all or nothing thinking. You're viewing things in absolute black and white categories. So that's the first, negative thought, or the cognitive distortion that can be there. Anything that's always or never really talks to that particular, negative thought. The second cognitive distortion is overgeneralization. You view a negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. It's also making sometimes things much bigger. Like this always happens. I never, catch a break, those types of things. And the thing is, when you say those words, when you have those beliefs, when you make that meaning, your subconscious mind goes, oh yeah, that's right. We never do. And then all of a sudden, you start feeling bad, because if you never caught a break, that would be a miserable life. But the fact is, it's an all or nothing distortion. It's an overgeneralization. It's not true. It's not true. We catch lots of breaks. But when we're depressed or anxious, we kind of just don't see them. We don't feel them as much. We're not, really, experiencing them that much. The third cognitive distortion is mental filter. And in the mental filter, you dwell on the negatives and you ignore the positives. And this happens to everybody who's depressed. It's like you're Velcro for negative things, and they keep sticking to you, and the positive things shoot past you. It's like you're Teflon. They can't even touch you. And once again, a lot of times we do mental filter. One of the best ways to understand these is to take something that happened. And in fact, we're going to kind of review a daily mood log that somebody filled out who had a depression relapse. So they had a relapse in their depression, and one of their negative thought was, I'll never get better. I'm a hopeless case. And let's take a look at our cognitive distortions. I'll never get better. I'm a hopeless case. So we've covered all or nothing thinking so far, and overgeneralization, and a mental filter. Do you think any of those distortions are in I'll never get better? I'm a hopeless case. Yeah, all three of those distortions, plus actually every single one we're going to cover. I'll never get better. I'm a hopeless case. And I mean, that's something anybody who is depressed could say, could think, could say. That's their family members could say, you'll never get better. You're a hopeless case. And they could believe that too. And the thing is, once again, it contains all 10 of these cognitive distortion categories in it. So all or nothing thinking, I'll never get better. That's all or nothing. And overgeneralization. They had a depression relapse. So they're overgeneralizing that to I'll never get better and I'm a hopeless case. Mental filter. Is it possible that they're dwelling on the negatives and ignoring the positives? Yes, it absolutely is possible. And once again, we'll address each one of those as we begin to create a positive thought to counteract that negative thought of I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case. Number 4 is discounting the positive. And it's kind of similar to mental filter, but this case, we insist that our positive qualities just don't count. And a lot of times, if you've gotten to be any age, if you're old enough to be watching this now, you've survived everything you've faced in life so far. And if you're old enough to be a relatively mature adult, you've survived a ton of stuff. So you have all kinds of resources, you have all kinds of skills, but when we're in a depressed or anxious state, we really don't see that stuff anymore. And it's because of some of these other cognitive distortions. Number 5 is jumping to conclusions. And this is a big one. This is gigantic for us, especially when we're depressed or anxious. And jumping to conclusions is about jumping to conclusions that are not warranted by the facts. So there's a little bit of legalism in here too. And Burns talks about 2 different categories of jumping to conclusions. His first is mind reading. You assume that people are reacting negatively to you in some way. They think I'm so-and-so. Event has happened that causes people to think about me in a particular way. They think I'm so-and-so. So that's assuming that you know how they think, what's in their thoughts. The second jumping to conclusions is fortune telling. And this is predicting that things will turn out badly. I don't know if any of you are worriers out there, but that's what worriers do. People who worry are predicting a negative outcome. They're predicting the outcome they don't want. And here's the interesting thing. Often we believe that that's really going to happen. And even professional mind readers and fortune tellers aren't really that good at it. Because, for example, the Psychic Friends Network went bankrupt and none of the psychics knew about it ahead of time. Not a single one. Nobody warned Dionne Warwick, who was their spokesperson at the time, to get her money out of this and move away from this thing. None of them warned the other psychics. None of them were aware of it. They were just sitting around taking phone calls and charging 60 cents a minute or whatever they were charging, $1 a minute or something like that. And then they went bankrupt. And you would think that professional fortune tellers and mind readers would be able to figure that out ahead of time, but they did not. They were unable to do that. So most of us are not professional mind readers and fortune tellers. Most of us are pretty amateurish about that. And so amateurs are even worse at predicting the future. So just remember that. Remember, our professional fortune tellers aren't that good at it. And it's really true. I mean, everyone talks about Nostradamus, but he was wrong, 90% of the time. He was heavily wrong, an awful lot. We don't have anybody who, if people could predict the future, they could make a fortune. They could do really well. Have you ever seen the headline, psychic wins lottery? It's only 6 numbers. What's the big deal? But once again, they didn't, they really don't have that particular ability. Now, if you're using psychics and things, great. And I wish you all the best. But, basically we kind of know that that's, they're not particularly good at, knowing our future overall. The 6th cognitive distortion is magnification and minimization. And this is like blowing things out of proportion or shrinking things down. And often when we're depressed or we're anxious, we magnify the size of our problems, and we minimize our resources, our ability to handle them. And they sometimes call that the binocular trick, where you're looking through and your problems look gigantic, and then you flip the binoculars around and you're looking at your resources and they're minuscule and tiny. Once again, magnification and minimization is in I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case. Of course, there's a jumping to conclusions in there. It's predicting a negative outcome. It's fortune telling. The magnification is, I'll never get better. It's gigantic, a hopeless case. That's huge. That's also number 7 in the cognitive distortion hit parade, which is emotional reasoning. See if you ever say anything like this. This is about reasoning from your feelings. I feel like an idiot, so I must be. I feel like a loser, so I must be. Have you ever said anything like that? Or once again, have you had those types of feelings? Because it could be implied inside too. And that's emotional reasoning. And once again, it's an emotion is based on, something, and the idea of loser or something is really a thought. Feeling like an idiot. An idiot is actually a very specific word, indicating an extremely low IQ overall. So once again, they're inaccurate, and so they're distorted thoughts. In this particular case, our guy who said, I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case, didn't, he didn't, say, I feel like I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case. But in that case, it's implied emotional reasoning, because once again, he had a depression relapse, and that, told that person that they were not going to get better. Number 8 is should statements. And once again, we talked a little bit earlier about Albert Ellis. They're the should. You use shoulds, musts, shouldn'ts, musts, ought tos, have tos. Yeah, it's not all positive. It should be this. It shouldn't. I shouldn't have done what I did. I should have had better parents. I should have gone to college. I shouldn't have, put my money into that stock. And all of those things. I mean, it might be true that you shouldn't have done that, but a should or a shouldn't is actually a rule that you're creating after the fact that you've already failed at. That's not going to make you feel good. Accepting what has happened can actually make you feel better. Or to allow what has happened to happen. That's kind of a mindful approach. And later on in our series, we'll talk about mindfulness. And perhaps that time we'll talk a little bit and give you some help with some meditation as well. Once again, very up and coming area. In fact, mindfulness, meditation, and self-compassion are kind of like the hot areas in psychology right now. And quite fascinating. And I'm learning more and more about them and applying some of their principles. And I'll certainly be bringing that to you down the line. So staying away from should statements. Number 9 is labeling something. And labeling is like, instead of saying I made a mistake or oops or something like that, you say, oh God, I'm such a jerk. What an idiot. You knock over a cup of milk and you go, what an idiot I am. It has nothing to do with your IQ. Maybe, a little clumsy, perhaps, or whatever, but you definitely, oops, I made a mistake. Oh gosh, I need to clean that up. Those are all, appropriate things that you should say. Well, you probably don't need to clean it up, but, I should clean it up. Once again, a lot of times we use those words anyway in our world, to indicate that. And in that case, it's actually accurate because it's, leading to something, You could clean it up, and should, if it's someone else's house, you probably should clean up the milk you spilled. Overall, it's good etiquette, but there is no real imperative to take care of that, unless, of course, you're at your mom's house, and then you definitely should, go ahead and clean that up. Number 10 is blame. It's like blame. That's interesting. My pastor, says when you blame, you are doing just that. You are be lame. He also says when you point a finger at somebody else, other blame, there's 3 fingers, as you can see, pointing back at you. So once again, and actually, that's how your subconscious mind handles something like that. It takes everything personally, and it makes everything current and now. So when you're really upset with someone, and often the Freudians believe that we got upset with someone because we saw something in them that we don't like in ourselves. And that's why we go after them or attack them for something like that. So that's kind of an interesting, it's called projection. It's kind of an interesting thought. It's not cognitive therapy, but it's just something to be aware of and to know about. So Burns says, with blame, we're finding fault instead of solving the problem. Self-blame is blaming ourselves for something that we weren't entirely responsible for. And often we can do that. A lot of people in recovery, because they're trying to get out of denial and things like that, blame themselves for everything for a while. And, the idea is to get to a place of personal responsibility overall. Other blame is even worse, because if you're blaming others and overlook ways that you contributed to the problem, you don't have a chance to solve it. Then you give up all of your power. It's all on them, kind of. And once again, not a good way to do it. Those things, all of those distortions, all 10 of those distortion categories are in the thought, I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case. They've labeled themselves as a hopeless case. They don't say the word should, but the implication is they should have gotten better. So that's implied in that. So once again, if you didn't pick should as something that should be in there, that's okay. Don't worry about it because you didn't hear should or must or ought to. But that's implied in that particular one. So all 10 of these things are in there. Certainly labeling, they call themselves a hopeless case, and blame, they're blaming themselves in this particular case. So once again, those are the 10 categories of cognitive distortions. And I would ask the question, how many distortions does it take for a thought to be distorted? And the answer is, it doesn't take 10, it takes one. One distortion makes a thought distorted in some way. And one way to think of distorted thoughts is like doing your world based on a funhouse mirror. And so, there's a mirror that will make anybody look like a round ball. There's a mirror that will make people look like a broomstick, kind of. Neither of those are accurate, pictures of the person. So the idea is they're distorted. It distorts how we look. And if you based buying all your clothes on the round ball mirror, you would have a bunch of clothes that wouldn't fit you. Likewise, if you did it based on the broomstick mirror. So that's the same thing with distorted thoughts. When we base our world on our distorted thoughts, our view of the world is distorted, and therefore we have emotions that are unnecessary. We are suffering needlessly in that case. So once you've identified that there's a cognitive distortion in a thought, then that's a distorted thought. And then you can go about the next task, which is actually creating a positive thought that meets two criteria. And the two criteria are your positive thought. You have to believe in it at a 95 to 100% level. So you can believe that it's true. And often we can do that if it's based on our history or something like that, or what we know to be true overall. And then the second thing is it has to put the lie to or crush your negative thought. Put the lie to it means that, turn it into, recognize that it's not true. It's a lie. It's incorrect. And your emotions are always true. They're always accurate. They're valid based on your thoughts, but your thoughts may not be accurate. They might be distorted, like what we're talking about here. So let's take a look at a couple of the distorted thoughts that this person had. And by the way, our person who had a depression relapse, they went through and circled their emotions, and they felt sad, anxious, ashamed, worthless, alone, humiliated, hopeless, frustrated, angry, and then also disappointed in themselves and in their program overall. And they felt all of those emotions at 100% level, okay? So their negative thought, I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case, they believed that 100%, but they found 10 distortions in that thought. And in finding those 10 distortions, that makes that a pretty distorted thought overall. So they created a positive thought, and they work with their therapist to go ahead and do this. And what I do with my clients a lot of times, I let them go ahead and create it. And if their positive thought doesn't move the needle on their negative thought, if it doesn't, take their negative thought down to a low level, then we work on creating a positive thought that once again they can believe, and the thought that crushes their negative thought. If you believe the positive thought, at 100%, you can't believe, and most people don't believe anything at 100%, so 95, we say 95 to 100%, you can't believe your negative thought anymore. So let's take a look at the positive thought for I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case. This client said, it's not true that I'll never get better because I actually got better several weeks ago. In fact, every time I felt anxious or depressed, I've always gotten better sooner or later. And they could believe that 100% because it was based on their history. They did get better a couple of weeks ago. They have gotten better in the past. So now this client's belief in I'll never get better, I'm a hopeless case, they said it went down to 25%. So they could, a portion of them, or they believed a portion of that, but it wasn't nearly as strong as it was before they challenged or disputed that thought. Let's take a look at another one of these. Their second negative thought was, this relapse shows that the therapy didn't work. And they believed that 100%. And in going through the cognitive distortions, they actually found 8 distortions in that particular thought. So once again, pretty distorted thought. And the positive thought that they made, that they could believe 100% in this particular case, and that did crush their negative thought, was the therapy did work, even though it didn't work perfectly. No one can be happy all the time. I just need to roll up my sleeves and use the same techniques that helped me the first time around. Interesting. Very reasonable, very rational, and when they can believe that 100%, when they looked at the relapse shows that the therapy didn't work, their belief in that thought actually goes down to 10%. We'll do one more and then I'll just wrap up the daily mood log. My improvement was just a fluke was another thought. They believed it 100%. That is discounting the positive and emotional reasoning. And then their positive thought was, that's a nutty claim. My improvement was the result of the hard work I did. It wasn't a fluke at all. And they could believe that 100% because they did work hard to change how they felt. And so their belief in my improvement was just a fluke drops down to 10%, just 10%. And once again, if we believe something 10%, we really don't, it doesn't affect our lives too much. Like I'm 10% sure that, Elvis still walks the earth, but I'm not spending my time looking for him or anything like that because I'm only 10%, I don't really believe it, too much overall. So they went through and did actually 9, negative thoughts. They changed them somewhere down to, the highest one was still at about 50%. And that was one about unfair. This is unfair. Other people don't have to work so hard to be happy. They found 5 distortions in that. They believed it at 100%. And their thought, their positive thought was, now I'm feeling sorry for myself again. I have the right to do that, but do I really want to? It's unfortunate that I'm afflicted with a tendency toward depression, but it's not unfair. And they could believe that 100%. And as a result, their belief in this is unfair, other people don't have to put up with this, went down to about 50%. But what you should really shoot for is dropping it down to like 25 or below, somewhere in that range overall. So that would be a positive thought that I would work on with that client until we took that down overall a little bit more. So that's the daily mood log. And once you've lowered your belief in your negative thoughts, you go back and you re-rate your mood. How sad do you feel afterwards? How anxious do you feel? How guilty do you feel, etc. And this person went down and became 50% sad, 20% anxious, 10% ashamed, 15% worthless, 10% lonely, alone, 10% humiliated, 25% hopeless, 35% frustrated. Yeah, it still was kind of frustrating for them. I can get that. 35% angry and 25% disappointed because it didn't stick in the way that they would like it to stick. However, those are significant drops in their overall, what we consider to be negative moods overall. And so that person was really helped by challenging those thoughts that were creating how they felt. And that's how you do a daily mood log. You can go ahead and use it, in that way. Anything that took place. One of the other examples I have, or I'll post on the website for members, is just standing in line at the supermarket and how someone got affected by someone else who talked to them in the supermarket and how they handled that. So there'll be some examples of that. I'll put the blank daily mood log up there so you can go ahead and print out a bunch of those and fill in the blanks. Once again, if you have any questions about it, you can bring those up at the office hours, which will be next week, next Thursday at 7. I'll be online. I'll send everybody a link to that, and you can, who are members, and you can go ahead and send me your questions ahead of time at rich@richwayne.com, or you can go ahead and just put them into the chat box when we actually get online at that time, and I will answer them live. I also will record those sessions. When there's participants, sometimes there's no participants, so I don't record those. But when there's participants, I'll go ahead and record those sessions, and those will be available on our webinar website as well. The second one we're going to take a look at is a thought record that was created by Christine Podesky and Dennis Greenberger. And they wrote a book called Mind Over Mood. They're actually therapists who live and work in Orange County, California. And Mind Over Mood has also sold millions of things. It's a thin workbook. Burns's books, Feeling Good and the Feeling Good Handbook, are pretty thick, 600 pages, 700 pages. Mind Over Mood's a nice, thin workbook. So a lot of times I start people with Mind Over Mood. And in Mind Over Mood, you follow 4 people suffering from different things, through their life and through their filling out of their thought records and changing, finding the distortions in their thoughts and being able to change how they feel overall, pretty positively. So with the thought record, this is what the thought record looks like. I'm going to hold that up for just a second. Those of you who could do a screen grab, you can do that and then, print those out. Once again, I'll have thought records available on the website for the members. And what you do with the thought record is you identify the situation you have, and there's some questions down at the very bottom of these sheets. There's little questions, and the idea is this. I love this one because it's kind of like this thin therapist that you take with you everywhere. You can just pull it out and fill out your thought record. Once again, you're likely not going to be doing that in the moment that you have a particular challenge or problem, but you will. You can do it that night or something like that. Or as you think about that problem and still feel some of those issues, you can go ahead and begin to challenge those thoughts. So you're going to take a look at the situations, the moods that were created, the automatic thoughts that popped up or images that popped up around this particular situation or events. And then you take a look at evidence that supports the hot thought. So this looks at both sides. What supports the hot thought? Do I have any good reasons for having this thought? The hot thought is the thought that's most responsible for the moods that you have. And I'll go through some specific examples of this here. So you look for evidence that supports the hot thought. Then you look at evidence that does not support the hot thought. From those two, you create alternative or balanced thoughts, and then you re-rate your mood. Once again, relatively simple sheet, pretty easy. And this one has questions or direction down at the bottom of the sheet. For example, in the situation, who were you with? What were you doing? When was it? Where were you? So you go ahead and write those things down. And what I like to do is have people take this sheet and keep it as a master, and then they can go ahead and just write those things down in their journal. One, and just describe their situation. Number 2, their moods. And it says describe each mood you have in one word: angry, sad, mad, fearful, anxious, whatever. And rate the intensity of the mood from 0 to 100%. So very similar to the daily mood log. You're rating your moods overall. Interesting thing about rating stuff. The minute you begin to rate things, you change the nature of it because you now kind of step out and you observe it a little bit. So it actually reduces the impact of things that are bothering you when you rate them. When you rate your belief in a thought, when you rate how intense you're feeling a particular mood or something like that. So once again, very powerful. Number 3 is you're going to take a look at your automatic thoughts, and it has a series of questions. It says, answer some or all of the following questions. What was going through my mind just before I started to feel this way? I love that question. It's a great question. I would just, if you don't do all this stuff, use that and then write down what was going through your mind, just before you started to feel this way. This will tell you what caused the feelings overall. His next question is, well, what does this say about me? Whatever was going through my mind. What does this mean about me, my life, my future? What am I afraid might happen? What is the worst thing that could happen if this thought is true? What does this mean about other people, how other people feel or think about me? So once again, we're taking a look at all these aspects of our world overall. What does this mean about other people or persons in general? Like maybe they're dangerous, or they're critical or unforgiving. We might have a generalization that we're applying to people in that. What images or memories do I have in this situation? So how is this similar to something that might have affected me when I was a child overall? So once you do that, the idea is to go ahead and circle the thought that you've identified, the specific thought that you feel is most responsible for the moods that you were having in that particular case. So you circle that thought, and then the idea is to write factual evidence to support this particular conclusion. And the idea is to avoid mind reading and fortune telling, or interpretation of the facts. So Joey thinks I'm an idiot. Yeah, that could be true, but we really don't know what Joey thinks. Joey said I'm an idiot is a fact. If he did, if he didn't say that, then it's not a fact. But if he did say that, that's a fact. You can write that down. But we don't know what Joey thinks. And that's what mind reading is, staying away from thinking we know what people think, because we really don't overall. So you write any factual evidence. Johnny hurt me on purpose. What's the evidence of that? Well, he hurt me. He, disinvited me to a party or something like that. And, in that particular case, you can go ahead and, write that down. He disinvited me to a party. He hasn't been responding to my phone calls. You can just write down any evidence that supports the hot thought that he hurt you on purpose. He's been more aloof lately. He's been, standing off. He, once again, is being non-responsive to me. Overall, there's lots of reasons why people could be non-responsive. In this particular case, once again, you're just writing down the factual things about the situation. And then you look for evidence that does not support the hot thought. And for that particular question, they have a bunch of things on a hint box. And the hint box that comes from another part of that book is, I put it on the back of my forms. It's a separate sheet, for our members. And the hint box on page 70 says, questions to help you find evidence that does not support your hot thought. The first question is, have I had any experiences that show that this thought is not completely true all of the time? Like, has Johnny been nice to me or something like that? If my best friend or somebody I loved had this thought, what would I tell them? So that's externalizing a little bit. It's getting it out from inside of you, and you think about somebody else, and if they were having that same experience, what would you tell them? This is like tapping into your own wisdom with that one. If my best friend or somebody who loves me knew I was thinking this thought, what would they say to me? Once again, an even further externalization. We are, channeling someone who cares about us. And what would they tell us? What would they say to us, etc. Overall. What evidence would they point out to me that would suggest that my thoughts are not 100% true? And as we think about somebody who we believe is wise or cares for us or something like that, a lot of times we know what they would say. We can even use people. My mom passed away in 1981, and I think about what would she say about that situation sometimes and things like that. And I know I have her inside. I carry around a construct of my experience with her inside of me, and that's true of everybody. And many of the people you've worked with or grown up with and things like that, they can always be with you in that sense, because we kind of know what they would say or what they would point out. When I'm not feeling this way, do I think about this type of situation any differently? How do I think about it? When I have felt this way in the past, what did I think about that helped me to feel better? Is there a way that I looked at something similar? Have I been in this type of situation before? What happened? Is there anything different between this situation and the previous ones? What have I learned from my prior experiences that could help me now? That could help me to get through this thing now? Are there any small things that contradict my thoughts that I might be discounting as not important in this particular case? 5 years from now, if I look back at this situation, will I look at it any differently? Will I focus on any different part of my experience overall? Are there any strengths or positives in me or the situation that I am ignoring? Once again, almost coming back to some of those cognitive distortions, ignoring, discounting the positive? Am I jumping to any conclusions in columns 3 and 4 that are not completely justified by the evidence? And once again, that's evidence that supports the hot thought, evidence that does not support the hot thought. Am I blaming myself for something over which I do not have complete control? Interesting one. I often say with folks that it takes at least two to tango. Sometimes it takes an orchestra, sometimes it takes a village, to go ahead and to help you tangle. And once again, many times we blame ourselves for things that we're not entirely responsible for. And, it's good to take personal responsibility for what you've brought to the party, but it's also good to acknowledge when someone else has some responsibility for some of the things that have taken place. So those are the questions you ask yourself that will help you find evidence that does not support your hot thought. Once you've done that, you want to create an alternative, so you once again write all those down. Anything that comes to you in that particular case, you go ahead and write that stuff down. Then you want to create an alternative or balanced thought. And Podesky and Greenberger have provided some questions to help you arrive at an alternative or balanced thinking. Based on the evidence I've listed in columns 4 and 5 of the thought record, evidence for, evidence against, is there an alternative way of thinking about or understanding this situation? Can I look at it from a different perspective? That's something that we're finding is very, very helpful from people. In fact, they sometimes call that cognitive reframing. It's just looking at it through different eyes, from a different perspective overall. Number 2 is write one sentence that summarizes all the evidence that supports my hot thought, column 4, and all the evidence that does not support my hot thought, column 5. This is a long, big comma splice sentence, so don't share it with your 8th grade English teacher. Does combining the two summary statements with the word "and" create a balanced thought that takes into account all of the information I've gathered? That's an interesting one. I like that one too, because all of a sudden everything is in one place and you're looking at both sides of the equation, evidence for, evidence against overall. Number 3 is if someone I cared about was in this situation and had these thoughts and had this information available, what would be my advice to them? How would I suggest that they understand this situation overall? Great question. Once again, externalizing the situation. If my hot thought is true, and sometimes they are, sometimes there is something negative coming down the road or whatever, what is the worst outcome? If my hot thought is true, what is the best outcome? If my hot thought is true, what is the most realistic outcome? It's usually not the worst case and the best case. Those are 1% things. Usually it's somewhere in the center, and it's often somewhat to the right of the mean, to the better side of things. So what is the most realistic outcome of this particular situation? It doesn't mean my life is over. That's the worst case scenario. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be just fine and I'll be, hunky-dory. That's the best case scenario. So what does it mean to me? What's the impact overall? And once again, it's almost like rating it a little bit. Can someone I trust think of any other way of understanding this situation? So you've kind of channeled them a little bit. You've taught, got your construct to tell you, but you could also ask them. You can present the evidence to them and ask them what they think. So once you've created your alternative or balanced thoughts, and it's a couple of thoughts that you go ahead and create, and you use those questions to do that, you re-rate your moods. Copy the moods over that you had before. You re-rate the intensity of each feeling. How angry are you now? How depressed are you now, etc. Once again, as well as any other new records that come about. Often when people fill this out and they look at it in that particular way, it dramatically changes how they feel. And this is one more that's more evidence-based overall. So looking at things that are more likely to be accurate or real and not some form of interpretation. So once again, 2 tools that look at this very, very differently, but kind of get to the same thing, which is disputing the negative thoughts that you have and helping you to convert them over so you can change the nature of your emotions overall. And, too, when I work with my clients on these, I'll go ahead and review them. And if there's something that didn't change too much, or they couldn't come up with evidence that doesn't support that event or something like that, I help them to kind of find that, or help them to create a balanced alternative thought. But often just asking yourself the questions that are on the sheet, following the protocols, actually gets you to that place where you're capable of doing that. Well, we've gone a little bit over our time, but I think it's worthwhile for this, because if you get good at challenging your thoughts, and once again, if you're not going to use the sheets, if you're not going to use a format, at the very least, write your thoughts down. Exposing them to the light of day sometimes causes you to go, wait a second, that's not true. And if you don't think something's true, all of a sudden its ability to impact you diminishes greatly. And that's the idea. We want to diminish the impact of negative thoughts on your world. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you're not yet a member of Do What Works Fast, we'll put a link available. You can certainly go to my website, richwayne.com, and there's a link to Do What Works Fast in webinars, and you can, that's RICHWAYNE, and you can go ahead and click on that link and join us and get all of these tools available to you. Plus, once again, at the end of the month, there'll be a hypnotherapy that'll be kind of guided to this. The hypnotherapy I'm looking at right now of providing for you folks is stopping your negative thoughts. So teaching you how to do that, getting your subconscious on board with that too. Next week, we're going to be doing office hours. So at 7 o'clock, I'm going to get online. I probably won't use this particular program to do that. I will, do a conference call or something like that. And you can get online and you can ask me verbally those things, or you can go ahead and send me those questions or put them in a chat box. And I'll try and answer all the questions you have about psychology and emotions and relationships and whatever. So whatever area you're interested in, it doesn't have to be related to this. That's a time for you, and you guys set the agenda for that particular one. Thank you very much for joining me today. And, I hope that you're getting something out of these, getting some good value out of this, and that you can go ahead and, really improve your life by, beginning to challenge some of the thoughts you have about it, what's going on there. Thanks again. And once again, I'm Rich Wayne, and I'll see you next week. Take care.